Okay, we're all set. Good evening, everyone. This is the Wolfeboro Planning Board meeting of February 16th, 2021. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the Planning Board. This meeting is an in-person and a virtual meeting. Public is allowed to access in person or by participating in meeting via attendance by coming to the town hall or via go-to-meeting through the login information below. Let me read that to you. https://global.go-to-meeting.com/join/918242429. If there are any issues, you can email directly to planning director at wolfeboronh.us if you have any questions or concerns. Now do a roll call vote. There are two people appearing remotely this evening, two members, and if you would please just indicate if you were by yourself in the room where you're talking to us from. So Peter Goodwin.
I am here and by myself.
Thank you. Von Dugan.
I am here with a dog.
Okay, thank you. Susan Replier.
Here.
Susan's here in person. And Mike Potter.
Mike Potter, present in person.
John Thurston.
Here in person.
Brad Harriman.
Here in person.
Okay, Brad is the Selectman's representative to the Planning Board. And Julie Jacobs.
Here as well.
And Julie is the alternate for the Planning Board. Tavis Austin also is with us. He is the Director of Planning and Development for the town. So the first item is on the agenda tonight is a voluntary lot merger at 134 Piper Landing. This is lot 158-021-000 and 158-023-001 for Cynthia and Clinton Johnson. This is on Piper Lane, and this was required by a previous approval given by the Planning Board. Tavis, do you want to give us a little history on this merger, please?
Sure. As Kathy mentioned, case number 2019-03 was a special use permit requested by this applicant to create a temporary wetland crossing that would allow them to essentially demolish what's left of the existing single-family home and build a new structure on that property. Interestingly enough, the condition for these two lots to be merged was actually posed by the applicant during that case. So in order to move forward towards construction on that lot, condition number 7 to that special use permit is a merger of the two lots. So with that, staff doesn't have any concerns with the proposed merger.
Okay, thank you. And this brings the two lots more in conformance. They're both non-conforming lots, more into conformance with the zoning requirements. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Be happy to move to approve this merger.
Okay, a motion has been made to approve the lot merger. Someone want to second that? John? Brad?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. I'll do a roll call vote. Peter Goodwin?
Yes.
Von Dugan?
Yes.
Susan Replier?
Yes.
Mike Hodder?
Yes.
John Thurston?
Yes.
Brad Harriman?
Yes.
And Kathy Barnard, I vote in favor of the lot merger. Okay, thank you, folks. Okay, so basically, we're in a work session tonight. And we have a list of items. We want to go through. The significant one, I think, probably is deciding on the 2021 work plan. But just, first of all, Tavis and I just did a taping for community TV on the zoning amendments that will be appearing on the ballot. We do that each year. Well, Tavis and I haven't done it each year, but we have been doing it each year since, I think, back to 2011. So anyway, we just finished that. Okay, the first item on the agenda after the lot merger is the drive-through committee update. This committee is made up of Susan, Mike, and myself, and we've met several times. And basically, the item that we're trying to come to grips with, first of all, is to we have all agreed in the past that we want to have some sort of a public session on drive-through restaurants to determine and find out firsthand from community members how they feel about drive-through restaurants. So I think the planning board, we've all discussed that as a group. And in our committee meeting, we thought that it would be good to initially get a reading by sending something out to everyone in the community, some sort of a mailer. And so that's what we've been working on, and we'd like you all to take a look at it tonight. But committee members, you want to elaborate on this? Either one of you, Mike or Susan?
Beg pardon. The planning board.
Kathy to move the mic closer to her.
Planning board essentially commissioned this subcommittee, or this group actually, it's not a subcommittee, as this group to look at ways of drumming up public interest in the public forum that we're going to be holding as a planning board on the issue, as Kathy said. So we did a number of brainstorm sessions, I think 2 of them altogether, and came up with these flyers that you see in front of us. The goal of this exercise is to, tonight, choose one of the 3, or a 4th if you think all 3 are terrible, and a 4th one would satisfy the exercise better. This would go into a mass mailer to all Wolfeboro taxpayers, and simply ask them a simple question: what do you think of drive-through restaurants? Should we change the zoning to accommodate drive-through restaurants or not? And yes or no comments, and then either hopefully drop this off into the town's Dropbox. And this was Susan's idea, to come up with a Survey Monkey, and you can go online to Survey Monkey and they can basically answer the same question online. It's much more convenient than doing a flyer. So that's basically where we stand. The idea, again, is just to drum up interest in the public forum. We plan also on putting an advert in the newspaper prior to the forum, telling them when, where, and how, and probably also an information piece in the newspaper letting them know that we're discussing this. Committing to nothing. The idea is simply to bring people into the room and listen to what they have to say.
Okay, Tavis, is there any way to share this with Peter and Vaughn? Do you have it on your email?
Sort of. I'll work on that. Just give me a second, and I'll share the screen.
Okay, all right. Sorry, Peter and Vaughn, but how do I hold it up so they can see it?
I'll get it there.
Oh, okay. He has the...
Julie has a question?
Yeah, okay. All right, yeah.
I have a question for Mike. Is there going to be something on this sheet of paper that's going out that says a meeting or a hearing will follow. As it stands right now, it just tells me to send this back, and it doesn't tell me to look for any more information in the future.
That's an idea we had not incorporated into the flyer, principally because I don't think we had thought about that. So thank you for that. When we discussed this flyer, the idea was to keep it as simple as possible, to ask the recipient to do as little as possible.
I can just see that after somebody says either yes or no, that that's the end of it. Like, I made my answer, not, okay, you gave your opinion and now we're all going to talk.
That's a good point. Yep. This is for discussion, so
yeah.
appreciate the feedback. Yep.
Yeah,
I think that's a good
Okay,
idea.
Susan, you've got to speak in your mic also.
I think that's a good idea. We can add that in there. What do you think?
Yeah, this is not written in stone.
Right.
We have time. And obviously that's why it was brought to the full board to get input and also to decide. We came up with 3 possibilities. One with logos of the 3 principal fast food restaurants or drive-through restaurants around. One with just the town's logo, and then one with town's logo or town photograph and the golden arches. We were concerned about using just the 3 drive-through restaurant logos or the town logo for fear that we might be prejudicing our public and thinking that this might indicate what the planning board proposes, or prefers, rather, better word, prefers. We prefer the town, we prefer drive-through restaurants. So I thought having the 2 of them together would balance it out. But again, if there's a 4th suggestion, which is better than these 3, it'd be great.
Well, if I can, my concern is that, in fact, my first reading of this, pretending to be the public, opening this in the flyer, how many people are going to say, Wolfeboro's current zoning, oh, I want McDonald's. So I think many could argue, I would suggest that some might be voting yes or no to McDonald's, or yes or no to any, I mean, if it had Wendy's, Arby's, McDonald's, but not Hardee's, they're going to vote on their individual flavor preferences. So to me, this almost suggests, do you want McDonald's or do you not want McDonald's? Even though the question is very clear, that's only drive-through.
We
So
had another.
That's my concern with putting any of the branding
We
on
had
it.
another example with 3 different logos at the
I can't
bottom.
understand what you're saying. Who's,
Susan was talking.
okay, all right, go ahead.
We had another example with 3 logos at the bottom instead of just 1. So that is another option. There you go. What do you think?
Did everybody
I think
get
you
these?
have to be very careful when you use somebody else's logo.
That's another,
That's a big issue. If it was just like between us friends, it would be one thing, but you're going to publish this and send it to the public. That's considered a copyright no-no.
You think this would not be this is not in the
I
public
mean,
domain?
maybe if you cut off the word Mickey D's and kind of smushed up the arches, you could get away with it. But when you use their whole complete logo like that, you're using their brand. They can come sue you.
This is not in the public domain. We
No,
could
it's
not
not.
claim we couldn't claim it's a fair use.
No. They would fight you tooth and nail, I'm sure.
It might even be construed that that the planning board putting this out or the planning board committee putting this out is looking to bias the community against a future application by one of those entities.
Well, that's why we thought to put
Yeah.
2 of them in together. I guess
Could we maybe look up some stock art
I'm
of,
sorry, I can't hear.
could we look up maybe some stock art of a picture of somebody going through a drive-in, but without any actual logos?
sure.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
well,
Reaching out of the car for the bag, the person's, leaning out.
Okay, for full disclosure, the committee was not all together on this. I don't think it's a good idea. I truly felt that we all wanted to find out how the community felt about the issue in general. And to me, this is skewing it. Now, that's just my personal opinion, but I have some concerns about that if we really want to find out from people. Plus, McDonald's can come in here today if they want just a restaurant and do not want a drive-through. So I think we're misleading people in a way. So anyway, was
Well,
my
that
feeling.
frankly
And I
is a bit of-
expressed it to the committee, but
That frankly is a bit surprising to me, Madam Chairwoman, but nonetheless, let's pass over on that. I don't think,
What was that?
I,
Excuse me?
I said that's somewhat surprising, the degree of objection that you have to this, because
I
it wasn't
stated that
really
at the
voiced
committee
at the
and
time.
said that it should be brought to the planning board.
But let's not go there, because I don't think it's going to be productive.
Okay, well, I'm
It would,
pretty straightforward, so,
there's no, I don't think, I personally have nothing to gain by having the logos. I thought it would work, but if it's not in the public domain, then it's not going to. And if our chairwoman has concerns about the message that it may be broadcasting, then maybe we should.
I have concerns, and I want to hear from the other planning board members. In any other case, if I am in the minority, that would be the way we would go.
Understood.
So that is pretty consistent with the way I've operated.
Understood.
Go ahead, John.
Hand raised,
Go-
Yeah.
hand raised.
Okay, go ahead, Vaughn. Just a second, John.
So we are very careful when we write architectural standards, not to call anybody out. We don't even talk about franchise architecture. I think putting a logo of a specific company is could expose us to lawsuits. And if you send it out to everybody in town, that's public. I really don't think we should do that.
Easily changed, easily changed. Really, this was just for discussion, and
Yeah.
I very much appreciate the point, I do.
Okay, go ahead, Peter.
I would suggest that the thought that you end up putting a picture of a drive-through with it, with no logos, no nothing, and people can end up making any thoughts as to how they view drive-throughs, but you're not dealing with any specific drive-through. And so I
That's
think that
fine.
makes it reasonably neutral.
Right. So substitute logo with a generic photo of someone going through a drive-through.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Go ahead, John.
I think Kathy makes a good point on the ability of a straight-up restaurant to file for an application, and I think what we're trying to do is hone in on that drive-through aspect. I'm not comfortable with having a logo either. I would be comfortable with a person in a vehicle grabbing onto a bag or something, showing a window.
Got it.
Yeah. I
Big
think
X
that's
through the logo.
Good suggestion.
You know, also, like what Tavis was saying, he read the first half of the sentence, and then he jumped right to the photos. That's what people do. That's why you put photos on these. So you're going to open it, you're going to see it's pretty, you're going to read a couple of words for a resident, then you're going to look at the photo. Then you're going to go back and read what the words say. That's, how we do it.
Okay, what we were, go ahead.
The only thing I was going to add is a question to the subcommittee is one of the new trends is not the restaurant where you pull up and order and receive food. Many corporations, we haven't mentioned them tonight, and I'm not going to throw out the name, are now moving to ordering online. So you order online, you pay online, and you literally drive through and pick up, which changes the dynamic quite a bit with neighborhood impacts. One of the things communities often look at with drive-throughs is the speaker or the audio system. So now you've got somebody in a running car shouting at somebody that's shouting back over a crackly speaker. Sometimes there's a bright display board to make sure that everyone's hearing the static correctly, and then you proceed to pay and pick up your food. But that model is greatly losing steam as technology moves forward. Somebody's driving down the road, they submit their order, they drive through town or pull off the interstate, whatever, and drive through and pick up the food. And it's a very short transactional process compared to what the traditional drive-through was set up for. There's another very specific, depending on the definition that the board ultimately contemplates for drive-through, would have to think about this. There's another very popular drive-through type restaurant where you actually pull in and park. It's very a la 1950s, where it's someone on roller skates or boots in the Northeast, where the food is carried out and literally put on the tray on the side of the car. So it's things for the committee to think about. There's all sorts of machinations of this that could evolve, and I'm willing to help the committee move forward as that moves forward, as that discussion moves forward.
Thanks, Travis.
Okay,
Travis, the new ones that you're talking about where you're ordering online, do they also have, like, you pull up into a parking place and a runner comes out to deliver your food?
You can do that too.
Is
Sure.
this a thing? I haven't been out of town for a while, you know?
Well, see, even before COVID changed the dynamic for all restaurants, even restaurants that would meet the current definition of restaurant, not restaurant carryout, allowed for pickup service. If you think of your, I don't want to use names, I really have a problem throwing names out. If you think of your traditional family style, modest price, out to dinner, say on a Friday, have a couple of designated parking spots for to-go service, which is a very fine line between order online, pay online, and pickup. Many restaurants are going to a model where you don't have to get out of your car because somebody brings it to you, or because you're going through a pickup window lane configuration to pick up food. I don't know if all of them meet the definition of drive-through as the committee is thinking about it right now. That's another issue I have with the logo. It has a very specific model of drive-through.
Okay. So what would you suggest?
Well, I think the question is fine, as it's stated. It currently prohibits drive-through restaurants, and I think what I would suggest the committee is looking for is, what is it about drive-through restaurants that Wolfeboro doesn't like?
It's this.
The committee's job is, I thought the committee's job was simply to, the group's job was simply to make it possible for the townspeople to know that this was going to happen, and then come in and tell us what they want. This group obviously is not going to be defining what a drive-through restaurant is or isn't. That may emerge out of the public forum. We don't know what's going to come out of the public forum. That's why we're holding the public forum. We made an undertaking to find out what the town thought about drive-through restaurants, and that's really all this group is trying to do, is to come up with a way of telling the people that there will be something to come to give us their opinions, and that's basically it.
So if 98% of the responses were no, would the board still look at having the forum to find out why?
Well, of course.
Okay, I'm just trying to say it so the public hears everything.
Because, that 98, I'm sorry if I'm taking too long.
No.
That 98% is only going to be a small fraction of the number of people who receive the flyer. And maybe there'll be another portion of the fraction that did not respond, who will want to come in person and say something. We just have to touch all the bases possible.
right, yeah.
So that when we're done with the exercise and we have come up with whatever we've come up with, we can say, yeah, we listened, and here are the ways we listened. So.
And that's what we were trying to do that's why the monkey survey, that's why that's added, because that's something people are comfortable doing. But when we have the public forum, we were going to also say, if you can't attend, you can send us an email. So we were trying to get as Mike said, as much input as we possibly can.
And because of the metrics that SurveyMonkey make available, I will pre-volunteer to help go through the paper ones. I think the board would have it be much more easy for the board to digest if all of the metrics were calculated through SurveyMonkey. So if 150 of them were returned hard copy, I'm happy to write received hard copy and enter the information
Okay.
into SurveyMonkey. That way SurveyMonkey will calculate all the metrics out of that. It sounds very giving, but it's really one question, so it's not terribly cumbersome.
Let's cross that bridge when we get to it.
So, is it my turn?
Yep.
So I wonder if, since we're going through the effort, should we get into more nuanced questions? You know, can you pull up to a curb on Main Street and have a runner come out and deliver your bag? Is that okay? You know, we have all these COVID things that are brand new, or is it the drive-through that's objectionable? I think we should break it down. If we're going to put together a survey, we should get more information.
Can I?
Yep, go ahead, John.
I think Vaughn makes a good point. I think Tavis just rattled off multiple different ways: order by phone, order online, have somebody skate to your car, have somebody roll to your car. I think our drive-through restaurants wording may need a typical drive-through restaurant does this, and that way we've packaged it into a defined discussion rather than is it the order online, the order by phone? Because I don't know if those are the drive-through restaurant that we're trying to get them to think about. Because right now, you could drive down to Louis, order by phone, and go pick up in the parking lot, which I think is still legal. So if we eliminated that discussion, we wouldn't fuzz up the whole conversation.
I guess I think of drive-through restaurants as something with a stacking plane. That's how we define it for our banks and retail establishments, that you have to have some sort of a stacking lane, and that would be on the property.
And that goes back to one of my original questions before the board put together the subcommittee. In a community that has drive-through pharmacies, drive-through banks, and drive-through other things, something hit the stop button on restaurants. And I don't know if this one question gets to that.
Madam Chairwoman.
But the forum would bring that out further.
As Tavis said, the forum will bring it out. I think
Right.
what Vaughn and John are describing is what I would call death by 1,000 cuts. If we have all of those questions in SurveyMonkey, I wouldn't take the time to fill them out, and you'd be asking me to use an awful lot of brain power, and I might get pretty tired, especially if it were the end of the day, thinking about, do I want to drive through, curbside, pick up here, pick up there. The reason the question is asked the way it is in the flyer is that's the way the drive-through restaurants are prohibited exactly in the zoning ordinance. And we're asking them, do they want that changed? So we're asking them specifically to address the wording in a definition in our zoning ordinances. If they say yes, then we know we have to do something about it. I think most people out there in the world know what a drive-through restaurant means. You get in your car, you drive by, you say, I want a burger, and you go to another window, you give them your money, and you get your burger, or your fish sandwich, or whatever else it might happen to be. I don't do these things. But nonetheless, I think everybody kind of understands the goal of the flyer and the goal of the SurveyMonkey is not to elicit the information that we hope to elicit in the public forum, where people can take their time.
Would it help any, Mike, if we added the word traditional? Ordinance prohibits traditional drive-through restaurants?
It doesn't prohibit traditional drive-through restaurants. It prohibits drive-through restaurants.
Period.
So with the drive-through restaurants that we have prohibiting in our ordinance, couldn't we just describe the drive-through restaurant that we prohibit at this point?
No.
No?
Think about it. It's not described in our definition. It's not described anywhere in our ordinance. It simply said drive-through restaurants are prohibited. It's left up to the zoning administrator to decide what is a drive-through restaurant.
Okay.
And that's one of the problems that we're facing.
In
And
fact,
they're in transition.
the definition is actually of restaurants, carryout, Then it describes a carry-out restaurant and then has a second sentence that said drive-throughs are excluded.
Right. So we tried
I
to
think that's clear.
restrain the language to exactly what is described in the ordinance and ask them, do they want it changed, yes or no? And that was essentially the question that we were given to think about.
So final thoughts I would have for the committee. Again, I am willing to ask town council if it's inappropriate to post a logo or any logos, if it's worth investing in that. But more importantly, my thought would be to scrap the photos altogether and then perhaps come up with a timeline. Your results will be included as part of a public information forum. The board anticipates blank date. I think the survey itself needs a start and end date.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tavis. My feelings have changed as a result of the debate here tonight. I don't think we should have logos. I think there are too many problems involved in having logos, none of which I anticipated. I'm sure others didn't as well. I think we do need to, as Julie suggested, tell people why they're getting this, and what's going to happen as a result of having sent out this survey. So we need to rethink this. I would propose that, and it's not a subcommittee, it's a group, I would propose that the DriveThru Restaurant group meet again. We can establish a date to meet again and come up with another proposal to present to the board.
Yeah, what our timeline was, I think we were trying to get this out, I think we said April. We would decide on April, and the end of March or April, and then have a meeting in May before the full-fledged summer season starts, but that most people are back. We would send the mailing to all property owners. But then, as Mike had said, we were also going to put something in the paper, and so that we should be able to make everybody aware of the fact that this is happening. Yep, go ahead.
Can't we
Julie.
just put this in the electric department's bill, like we normally get other things?
We've looked into that, and there are two ways of doing it: putting it in the electric bill, or getting labels from the assessor's office that have all the property owners, and sending a bulk mail through the.
Yeah, that's just more expensive than tagging on with the electric bill, that's all I was.
Right, we
pointing out.
have a little more flexibility if we do the bulk mail.
Sure.
So is everybody, okay, so we're going to add something about a follow-up meeting, have some sort of a picture of a drive-through so people know what we're talking about, add some dates once we determine when this is going to be sent out, and what was...
I have a request.
Okay.
And my request is that we put the text directly from our ordinance and say, would you like to change this to allow drive-throughs? So that they know exactly what we're doing.
Oh, okay, well,
We'll try.
Instead of just saying, would you like to have drive-throughs? Put our zoning ordinance quoted or in bold and say, would you like to change this to allow drive-throughs? Because then they'll know where it comes from.
Doesn't
okay.
that, we'll talk about that. It seems to me that the first sentence of this flyer says exactly that. It reads, and I'm not sure if you have it, Vaughn, Wolfeboro's current zoning ordinance prohibits drive-through restaurants. It's kind of black and white. Without quoting the language of the definition, it says the same thing. And it says it in a straightforward declarative sentence.
well,
I personally think it's more interesting to quote it because it talks about carry-out versus drive-through. So that it makes it more nuanced, and that's what we're going to be grappling with.
okay. All right, thank you. Other comments? Okay.
I would suggest that the idea that you have carryout is what is right now being done by people ordering online, and so therefore I think that is a useful thing to have in the statement.
I did not understand a word you said,
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah, Pete,
Say you didn't.
yeah, Peter, I'm sorry, we didn't understand what you said.
I don't know how I can change what I'm doing because I'm speaking to my computer. But I think the idea that you're talking about carryout in the statement is very good because it says the difference between drive-through and carryout.
Oh, okay. So you think we should add something? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so, okay, go ahead.
How old is this ordinance?
Not very.
95 or 96. Don't hold me, but
Okay,
in the
the world has
90s.
changed a lot since then.
Huh?
I
Really?
said the world has changed a lot since then.
Oh, yeah.
So
Right.
probably it's a good idea to look at it anyway, because of all the things that we just listed and talked about.
Okay, so we'll get our little group back together and we'll come back with the changes. Or if we might possibly come back with all the changes, but we
We'll do
might
what we
not.
can.
We'll consider them.
I think this is a good draft one.
Thank you. Okay, all right. On to the next, the master plan implementation matrix update.
I'm happy to address this. It's not complete yet. I'm trying to come up with an easy reader-friendly view of the top three from each of the master plan chapters, and I'm still coordinating with some of the groups on revisions to their top three based on the board discussion, and thinking specifically also of infrastructure and how to get that presented as the way John and Mike had put that work together. And I hope to be back at your next meeting with a reader-friendly version of that.
Okay.
Great.
Just to all of your committees that you're working with, there was some people expressed some concern about the 3 priorities. We were just trying to be sensitive, but if the committees want to work on more than 3 priorities, that's great. So please don't be restricted by 3 priorities if there are other things that your committees want to work on. So just wanted to throw that out there. Tavis, I think you're meeting with the Energy Committee on Friday.
Correct.
So,
And the Ag Commission on the 4th.
and the Ag Commission. Okay, great. All right, so to be revisited. How about Plan New Hampshire and the charrette? How is that moving along?
It's actually moving along quite well. I had a Zoom meeting with them, when was that? End of last week. I met down with Robin LeBlanc and 2 others from Plan New Hampshire. They have put together I think it's about a 20-slide PowerPoint on what the charrette is, how it works, how it can be deployed, and how they're looking to deploy it in the COVID environment. You know, modifications to their typical way of doing a charrette. What I have yet to receive from them is that they're modifying the schedule a little bit to accommodate social distancing and more virtual settings for certain components of their charrette process. Once I have that, I'll share it for the board. I've tentatively set up with them, and I haven't gotten you, Madam Chairman, up to speed on this yet, but I've invited them tentatively back on March 16th. as a more of a work group setting for them to run through at least a portion of their PowerPoint presentation, and also to address how they've modified their model to accommodate for COVID. But they are perfectly willing to meet hybrid, virtual, in-person, et cetera, in order to pull off the charrette. So what I was hoping to do at this meeting, but I've yet to have all the information, is be able to give you an updated cost model for the COVID version of a charrette. But they seem very motivated and capable of doing the charrette despite the restrictions currently in play.
They are. My question about the charrette is, it doesn't necessarily involve public input?
Yes,
And how are we going to do that under COVID?
socially distanced.
Well,
It sounds to me like unless there's a pressing urgency for the charrette, that we ought to wait until everyone's been jabbed or the emergency has been declared over.
Vaccinated, correct?
That's my suggestion.
right, I agree. I mean, the reason we wanted to move ahead with this was to have the community participate, and I'm not sure that it sounds like it's going in that direction. I mean, literally participate in their bodies in person, and to be able to walk around the area, you know, as a group and have discussions. But
They're willing to accommodate that. Other things they've done is to have people be on a trolley so that you're able to space people, yet everybody is able to communicate within the same space so that people aren't, you know, if everybody's walking, they could be tens of feet apart and not being able to hear or participate in the discussion. But if you're able to virtually or tour it, I don't want to say virtually, if you're able to tour it on a trolley or a confined space, even if it were two separate trolleys with scribes, you'd be able to have the benefit of the conversation. But if the general consensus of the board is to wait until everyone's vaccinated and the pandemic is over, then I'll let them know that.
well, when are they? When are they talking about doing this, in the fall?
This would be in the fall, yes.
Okay, go ahead, John.
The way I'm thinking about it here is, it would be nice for a charrette to be viewed first, put on community TV, people can see it, they can get some ideas, and then we can have a formal in-person or social distance situation. I mean, get a dry run going so people understand what's going on, so they can generate some thoughts and do a little homework, and then they can chime in.
Trouble is, we don't know how long a delay there is going to be between seeing it on the screen and getting all excited, and then the governor saying, yep, you can go back to your life now. And do the charrette.
I'm with you. I'm just trying to move the ball around and give the people a little bit more information that they wouldn't have until they got here.
Well, just to be clear, the way the charrette works is in the COVID-free environment, the community walks the area that the charrette is to be done and provides feedback. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely if there was a this, or what if we had this or that, or other things? And then the charrette team thinks on it with their landscape architects and designers and formulates the charrette, and then comes back and says, this is what we heard you say.
Understood. But
So it's
public
hard to
input
cart horse cart.
public input doesn't just happen on the walkabout. After the walkabout's over, usually we come back to a place and we all sit down and brainstorm with each other and write things on whiteboards.
Correct, and that's the tricky part.
And
in
that's the part
pandemic.
that currently can't be accommodated. And that's the part where people's brainstorming activities bounce off each other's ideas, and new things show up that weren't considered before, which we're going to lose if we're all a 6-foot distance and we're maximum 75 people in this room.
Or people elect not to participate at all because it's still a pandemic.
And people won't participate because they're afraid.
Yeah, I mean, one of the last ones that we did, that sort of thing, we were all standing around tables looking at maps, that sort of thing, literally hugging each other.
Yeah.
And it was okay. Everybody was fine that day. You know, we made friends, but there's no way that we can do that now. It's just not a smart idea.
I don't think there's anything to lose by waiting until we can hopefully get back to normal and then run the charrette at that point.
Right.
rather than try to run it under current circumstances, which are far from ideal, just because we're working on momentum that was exciting back when there was no COVID. So I would propose that we instruct the planner to instruct the Plan New Hampshire charrette guys to put their plans in the file folder and wait to be called. And we'll get back to them if that's the way it works, because it's a good idea, it's just not appropriate now.
So the money was raised in 20. I put a purchase order in to secure that money for 21, and I will go through the process to find out if that can be done for another year or if it would have to be a new warrant article moving forward.
Well, if
Either way, it's not, in the grand scheme of things, a monumental amount of money.
right, and this is February, progress is being made to control the disease. Who knows if perhaps by September it will be under enough control that some of the
true.
restrictions will have been lifted. And we can run a charrette the way charrettes are supposed to be run.
Yep, that's possible.
So the idea, the reason I floated March 16th is so that Plan New Hampshire could attend hybrid or virtually and walk the board through the process to then help guide the decision. Do we want to try for fall? The only suggestion they had was that if the town waits too long, whatever air quote too long is, other towns might take up the fall.
That's what they tell you when you come to buy a car, isn't it? If we have these guys come in March, are they going to want to get paid for their little dog and pony show?
I haven't seen that in writing yet.
I'm sorry?
I have not heard that they want to be paid for that, no. It was to
Then
say,
we lose
I would
nothing by hearing a
assume-
presentation. If the board wants to hear a presentation, as long as it doesn't cost us a dime to have
and
them
I
run
can
it.
confirm that before that happens, yes.
Their ideas are going to be fresh too, so they're going to want to get that out on the table too. And then if you just hide it in the folder for a while, what may happen is they may come up with a different idea and add that to it. But I think if they did a lot of work, they want to get that out there.
What date? What's
Is
the
it,
date?
March 16th.
16.
okay, so that's when you're meeting with them again, right?
No, that's your planning board meeting. I was inviting them to go
Our
through the
planning bo-
PowerPoint.
Okay. Okay, how do the rest of you feel? Do you want them to come and make a presentation in March and then make a decision? Or will the decision
Could we-
have been made?
Could we share this PowerPoint without having them come and deliver it?
I can ask them if they're willing to do that, yes.
But if it costs us nothing, Vaughn, to have them come and do it, we're going to lose something if we simply get their PowerPoint without their commentary. So I would ask them, if it doesn't cost the planning board or the town any money, and they're willing, come on in and do their presentation, because we'll learn something, we'll gather some materials.
My thought process in inviting them was to have them be able to address board questions on how they're running a charrette. They're currently working with a couple of other communities that are on the fence. Is it going to work during COVID restriction or not? And let them explain the model as they've modified it for that, because that would better aid, in my mind, the board being able to make a decision as to whether it was worth, reserving September or not.
Okay. So is everyone comfortable with them coming in March, and then we'll make a determination?
You're saying coming, are they going to come here or are they going to be virtual?
Well, they're going to be on our agenda.
They're going to be on the agenda. I'd leave it to them if they want to come and be in person and or hybrid, yes.
Oh, so we don't know if they're going to come in person.
Well, I'm going to reach out and find out if it's in fact free. If it's free, if they're only hybrid, then that's one thing. If it's free, whether they're in person or not, I'll leave that to them. Because I think they can address questions whether they're in the room or not.
I would be happier to have them in the room. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but that's just me.
I would rather have them in the room too.
Right, and we're not obligated to anything, right?
Right, they can say no.
Fine.
Yeah, they
Okay, so,
I mean,
We can say,
We can say no.
You're going to get more information for us?
Yes,
right? Okay.
I'll communicate with you on whether or not it's on the agenda.
Okay. Did
Thank
you
you,
want to add
Patty.
something?
no, it does not going to hurt to ask.
Yeah, right, okay, right. Okay, very good. All right, the 2021 work plan. I'm not sure, I don't know what the noise is.
It's not here.
Okay. All right. Tavis, did you have any thoughts on the 2021 work program, or do you want us just to list items that we think we should be looking at, or?
For me, frankly, it's more helpful if the board put together the list, yes. And then I can allocate time accordingly.
You want us to put things out on the table? Okay. Okay, well, first of all, we've got the lighting committee, so that certainly is on the 2021 work program. We have the short-term rental issue, which has been postponed for a year, and so it seems that should continue to be on. If anybody objects, let me know. We talked about housing, multifamily housing. Tavis had given us a draft of the multifamily ordinance to consider, and Mike had been looking at the affordable housing and inclusionary zoning, right, Mike?
Yes, I can address that later on tonight.
Okay. All right, so is everybody okay putting that on the work program? What about habitable space? Did you folks want to talk about that more?
No. Sleeping dogs lie.
Oh, okay.
I'm good. I think we had a discussion. I think we've asked the planning department director to honor the board's request of the way we'd like to see it, and if there's legal problems, then he should come to us and describe what they are and why we can't do what we want to do
Okay,
with the wording that we've presented.
okay, all right. Is that okay with everyone?
Just clarification, is that habitable only or habitable / accessory dwelling? I know the issue in the background.
Yeah,
That's why I said no.
Oh, sleeping dogs?
Yeah.
Got it.
yeah, well, it was basically, we were talking about the habitable space in the accessory building, so that's what, yeah. In accessory, okay. Stormwater management, we have a committee, so that's on our work program. Impact fees. We've talked about that issue, and there's going to be more discussion about that, but it seems like that should be on.
Kathy,
Yeah.
aren't we waiting for a report to come back on the impact fees?
Yeah, well, yes. and
We'll be talking about that later on tonight, too.
Right.
It's on the agenda.
So, yeah, I mean, these things have all sort of in progress that I've mentioned. DriveThru Restaurants, I guess we're married to that one until we figure out what the next step is. Let's see, that was, and of course the master plan priorities. Another issue that has come up is the filter bed road. That area, do we want to move ahead and think about some zoning issues,
I
changes, something of that nature. We certainly have discussed it a lot in the past, and it's in the master plan. Go ahead, Mike.
It's on our agenda for later on tonight, so I'll just wait.
Okay. Just trying to make sure we got these things.
It should be on the work program, though, yeah.
I
Yeah.
think so too.
Okay. Anybody else have any other?
Conservation subdivision regulations, Tavis was going to review those. That was when you, I, and Tavis met last December.
Yeah.
That was going to be on. The only other one that I had on my list of work programs that I guess will be new to the board, and that's your idea, Madam Chairwoman, of the housing study planning for the Glendon, School, Union, and Laner Streets areas.
Yes.
A favorite idea of yours.
Right.
That's a very big project.
Yeah, and that actually almost ties in with the charrette.
It does, and,
Yeah.
and maybe that would be something to think about when we come to do the charrette.
Right.
All right. Then I'll make that notation in my files.
Okay, any other thoughts, ideas, burning issues that we should be addressing?
I think that's quite a list.
Well, whether it's something that the board is going to add as a work product or not. One of the projects I'm doing as projects come through is to look, and this isn't to make an issue or a big discussion of this tonight, but there are a number of instances in the definition section of the zoning ordinance that appear to include both a definition and a regulation. So one of the thoughts I'm going to try and spell out very clearly in the presentation to the board is a number of instances where that occurs in the regulations, and explain to the board perhaps why I see it as a hindrance more than a benefit to the town to have regulation infused in the definitions. So there are certain things that are defined, and then the definition goes a bit further to include a regulation or a regulatory element other than just a definition.
Much like drive-through restaurants.
Drive-through restaurants, accessory dwellings, or not accessory dwellings, accessory structures. I think a more prudent approach, and I'll try and explain eloquently and without bias to the board why I believe such is to be true, but would be to put together a general regulations section of the ordinance that spells out all of those elements, so that in all zones, the particular regulations are illustrated right up front in the ordinance. So you wouldn't have to make a change to every zoning regulation, but there are a certain set of truisms across all zones that is currently accomplished by putting regulations in the definition. That will make more sense when I explain it to you, but that's not something the board needs to work on necessarily, but it is something I'll be looking at for the board to consider in the future.
Okay, well, it would require a warrant article.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the idea is to put it there and see if the board says, oh, yes, it perhaps does make more sense that way, or no, thank you. You know, appreciate the work, but we like it the way it is. I'm going to be fine either way. I'm just going to try and provide rational arguments either way, so the board can have an informed decision, and then it's either on the warrant or not.
I think that, if I may, Madam Chairwoman, anyone who reads our zoning ordinances from start to finish carefully will realize that they're like an ad hoc organic growth. They've just been added to and slapped together, and there is no coherence to our zoning ordinances. We have articles with A letters on them. We have articles that are in Roman numerals because we have ordinances that are in Arabic. And there's just no organization, and they become very difficult to use. There's no index. It's not easy to find what you're looking for unless you know exactly where it is, or unless you thumb-tabbed your ordinances. It wouldn't hurt to have a fresh pair of eyes look over the entire book and reorganize it so that it makes logical sense, as long as we don't have to have a warrant with 100 articles of
right.
zoning on it.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
not do it all at the same time necessarily, but it does need some logical distribution.
I would agree. I went through the book within the last few weeks and tried to start to make heads or tails of the complete picture. And there's no sequence of order when you go from one section to another. And it's really hard, I could say, for a individual to come to the town, look at the ordinance and try to decipher and then compare it to other ones. If you look at other towns like Madison's all have a standard format that goes through every section, and if you see it in one part, you see it in another part, and like Mike says, there's no index which cross-references to a page, and it's very difficult to make rhyme or reason out of it.
So how would we proceed with something like that, Tavis?
Slowly.
Well,
Or
yes,
all at
I
once.
would say slowly, but at the same time, if all you're changing is the ordination of the document, let's just say every word was exactly what you wanted it to say. It's not, and I'll, wager legal opinion on this, but I think if you're simply renumbering, it's not a substantive change. So it might be, let's just put everything in the right order and renumber it, and then come up with it. Now, where you get into John's point of a consistent theme, if you always have a purpose and intent, a description of the zone, allowable uses, special permitted uses, and you need to retitle specific sections. So it's not 3B permitted uses. Once you change the word permitted uses to permitted in the zone or something like that, then you have arguably a substantive change. But if you're just renumbering the whole thing, you basically just have to make sure everything that went out is back in and it's been renumbered. And procedurally, I think I could probably work with general code on that to see if they could just put everything in the sequential order. Or manipulate it myself to a close degree, and then it's a lot of careful reading to make sure nothing was left out.
And one more thing at that point, if it has to go for a warrant article at that, we can vote to accept the updated version and go on in one more sentence to say it has been updated and renumbered pages for more, readability or whatever.
Yeah, it just means we have to go through the process of public hearing and blah, blah, blah. It's just, complicated and
Yeah.
time-consuming, but it's not insurmountable by any means.
No, it wouldn't be any worse than master plan of having it, come to a certain time at a certain place, and here's the document, it's ready to go. We're still using the old version. And then it would just move up to, do we vote to accept the new updated page numbering or whatever it is?
And it doesn't have to all be done in 1 year either.
No.
This looks to me like a multi-year project.
Well,
It may, but I know that we're going to be diving into certain sections like the lighting and the stormwater, and I was wondering if we could get a rhythm going with the stuff that we're going to be looking at currently and get a process going that way.
Well,
Yeah,
and then to that,
cross-reference and
Yeah.
things, yes, yeah.
well, to that point, if there are certain outcomes of the lighting committee or the stormwater committee, and the lighting committee wants to recommend that the planning board consider a set of lighting regulations. And the regulations can be something that the board can amend it with just a public hearing, not a town meeting process. And the zoning ordinance is simply updated to say, see site plan lighting regulations, for example. So that's a town meeting vote to change the zoning to say that see the regulations, but then the board can be flexible within the public hearing process to amend the regulations. You could do that with stormwater, you could do that with lighting. It's conceivable you could do drive-through regulations, so that the regulations could be more moldable as time moves on.
Site plan review.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is something that needs to be looked at, but one of the things that's always frustrated me is that we have definitions in various sections, and that just, I find that so confusing because I really think some of them may be contradicting one another.
Yep.
You know, if you're looking at the conservation overlay and the definition section, and all of those definitions really should be in one place, but,
Correct.
oh, that is a
And that goes to Mike's point. There are a number of amendments that were made over time. You know, there's a certain amendment to address a certain issue du jour, if you will, or issue de era. And then it was left in there in the ordinance, and then there's a subsequent revision later to address the new iteration of that same ism, if you will, but both are now in the regulation, so which one applies? And you enter into a situation where A of this section is more restrictive, but B in this section is more restrictive, so it needs to get clarified. And I'm happy to dig into that.
I think it would be good, I think, to have that on our work program as kind of an ongoing thing, because as you say, if we do it in small pieces, we may all of a sudden be where we want to be, but I share John's concerns. When you're looking at residential zones and all of a sudden you're back into commercial, and then you go a few chapters more and you're back into residential, that must really blow people's minds when they're trying to use the documents. So there are some things that seem like they may be an easy fix.
Yes.
Is what I'm thinking. Okay, well, is it okay with everyone if we put that on the work program? Sure. Because that's something that we can sort of get.
What are we exactly putting on the work program?
Well,
Can you define it?
No, just so that the planning board is conscious of the fact that we think this is something that needs to be dealt with, but we would be looking at it over time.
So how will you describe it?
Thank you.
Update the format of the document?
Standardizing the format of the zoning regulation or the zoning ordinance or something of that nature. We can leave it to Tavis. He can think how to.
Renovation of the zoning ordinance.
Renovation.
Right.
I'll come up with a fun title.
Yeah, Tavis, are there other examples of other places that have like really simple to read ones that you could like pull a couple of pages out of that you know of?
Go online, you can read all types of ordinances in
Yeah,
all the
other
towns around
towns.
us.
They say, oh, this one's really clear, you know what I mean?
Well, one of the more interesting ones is actually what I provided a memo to the board on a couple of meetings ago with the multifamily section. If you didn't know that section was in the ordinance, you'd never know it was in the ordinance. Because there's nothing in any of the residential districts that say, see also this article way in the back. If you happen to open the ordinance online and type in multifamily, it comes up, but it's not clear, you know, differences in the zoning district names aside, there's nothing in the rest of the ordinance that points you to that section. So if you didn't happen to remember it was in there, you wouldn't know it was there.
That's why I think it would be a good idea to have it on the work program, because it'll be in all of our minds, and as we're changing things, we can start doing it right away.
So
to some of these
procedurally, what I'm
ordinances.
doing is there's a whiteboard in the office, or a dry erase board in the office, and every time something pops up, I'm writing it down, question mark. When did this come in? Where did it come from? Is it still relevant? Where does it fall apart? So the framework of this is in process.
Living document.
Good.
You're doing it.
Okay, so could you come back to us at the next meeting with a revised, with a work program based on this discussion tonight of the...
An updated work plan bullet list with all of the projects, yes, I can do that. Is that what
Okay.
you're asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item, impact fees. Yes, Mike and Tavis, you folks met to discuss this the other day.
We did. I won't speak for Tavis. It seems to me, and I think it seems to Tavis as well, that at this point, we should keep impact fees on school projects only, or on projects that impact schools, to have impact fees on school impacts only. Not to expand them into municipal projects, not to expand them into commercial projects, to request Maybury to update the school fees because they're vastly out of date, to recommend a cap on the maximum fees assessed per project, something he's recommended, to look over our ordinances. There are a number, I won't go through each individual piece. What I'm suggesting is that there's more work to be done on our side to instruct Maybury with what we want done, and that's going to require another meeting, Tavis, me, and the chairwoman, to get together exactly what we want Maybury to do, figure out how we're going to pay his fee, and then to come back to the board for your approval to contract with Maybury for the part 2 of the update on the impact fees. It will be, he'll present a number of different structures. He doesn't like the bedroom structure per bedroom, but he prefers square footage. He also will, he'll provide us with an assessment schedule based on square footage and based on dwelling type, dwelling size. So we have a choice between the two and recommend either one or the other. And so we'll be able to tell him what we want, and he will be able to present us with a package that we have discussed and decided is what we want.
Okay.
So I think that Kathy, me, and Tavis need to get together on that again soon so we can get this wrapped up soon.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is the last time the planning board discussed this, there was a general outline of what Tavis was asked to do. So I did, just to affirm to the board, I did reach out to Maybury with the questions that Kathy and Mike and I came with after the board had discussed it, and he provided a rather in-depth response to what the questions were. So the board is aware there was originally a contract with Maybury signed that was a 2-phase contract. The first part was $2,500. That resulted in the report that the board discussed a couple of months ago. Phase 2 of that report was to update the impact fees as currently written for a set price. That price was not in the 2021 budget, nor was it secured out of the 2020 budget. And so when Mike and I first met last week, I floated the idea of going and seeing, if we were to update the fees for the amount of money that was in the contract, that ultimately wouldn't garner the town more money in impact fees than the cost of, finding the money in the 21 budget, if you will. But what we very quickly discovered, and Mike very professionally glossed over it, is we really need to reassess what phase 2 of that project is, and then come up with a new price from Maybury for that work, and then have the board decide if it wants to move forward this year or not. But his answer to the town's questions posed more questions than they answered. So that's what we're trying to address, how to better evaluate that phase 2 work, and then look to potentially process that this year.
Yeah, currently our fees are assessed on a dwelling type, and we've come across 2 examples so far last year, beg pardon, of individuals who have put up a 1-bedroom house, single people, hit with a $4,000 school impact fee, and have asked for relief, and we have no way of offering them relief because there's no waiver provision in our ordinance to do that. The fees seemed It's in line with our schedule, but it seemed excessive to me. It seems that if we have a fee based on square footage, which is what our expert Maybury suggests that we do, that the fee amount in a case like the two I just mentioned would be less than the $4,000. So it would be fairer to individuals who don't have children, who do not currently intend to have children, and are putting up a small one-bedroom house someplace. In addition, with the square footage, we're able to capture other projects in the future should the board decide to expand impact fees to include municipal projects, not just school projects. We would have a fee structure built into our ordinance that would allow us to grow into an expansion if that is what the board and the town decided was a good idea. But that's, as Tavis said, is going to require a recasting of the contract and probably a different cost. But we won't know that until we've finished with our work and gotten in touch with Mr. Maybury and asked him what he wants for his work.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, since we're in a regional school district and Wolfeboro were to pay impact fees based on a scale of square footage, and a neighboring town that uses the regional school doesn't pay impact fees, are we overburdening those people that will be paying the impact fees in our town? Is it a fair level playing field in our regional school district?
I guess my response to that question is I haven't looked into how other communities that are part of the cooperative school district are paying their dues. If they're collecting that out of general taxation and submitting it that way, whereas Wolfeboro is offsetting general tax by looking at impact fees, you know, does that answer your question? I mean, presumably every community that's part of the cooperative has some dues, for lack of a better word, that are owed. So if other communities are electing not to do it out of impact fee collection, they may be doing it out of general taxation or some other financing method. So I don't think Wolfeboro is paying a disproportionate share of its dues by virtue of having impact fees.
So, for instance, if we just decided no, not to impose impact fees, would we be disingenuous to the other communities that are paying them?
No, because what we're doing with our impact fee is paying down our share of the school bond,
Okay.
not the whole school bond.
On another note, there are a lot of properties and square footage in town that have no children in the school system. So I think it would be equitable to have any impact fee go toward services generally, not just schools, police, fire, roads, all of the services that we pay for. And it makes more sense for a lot of the properties and square footage in town, if that's how we're doing it, to pay towards those.
Vaughn, I would agree with you completely. It was my thought when we were talking about impact fees that we have an ordinance which has not been updated for at least 10 years, vastly out of date, not only in terms of how much the fee assessed and the fee basis, but also the school enrollment basis that it is used, that the fees were established on. That has changed. We have declining enrollment. My thought was, let's fix the problem that we have currently, which is inequitable and is not working and is out of date and so forth, is therefore not in conjunction with the statutory requirements. We haven't met them since the day the fees were established. We've got to get back into that. And then should we want to move out and assess impact fees to cover municipal projects like the upcoming public safety structures, like the inevitably upcoming senior center or social center, or whatever we're going to call it, we can do it in a second go around. But I thought, let's get the current problem fixed, and then we can go to expand it if we want to, and we will have a firm base on which to build that expansion. We don't have that firm base now.
I have a question, and can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I have a question as to why it is the planning board who is in control of these impact fees instead of the select board.
Because the state's given it to us.
Okay, that explains it completely.
I wish I could do that all the time.
Well, and the answer behind that is the planning board is the one that's looking at how the future of the town is going to develop. So if you're looking at particular areas that are going to develop or how different zones are going to be developed and what those zones are going to be developed with, the planning board has the best ability to anticipate where the capital growth is.
Right.
And then put the fee there to capture it. So that's why the statute says it.
Okay, so you'll hear more about this soon because we need to keep moving this along. Is
Right.
that what you folks decided? Okay, all right, very good. The next item is to appoint the Filter Bed Road Pine Hill Study Committee. We've talked about this a year or so ago, wanting to take a closer look at that area, and as I mentioned earlier, it's in the master plan. And Mike and John have indicated an interest. They'd like to get involved in this committee, and anyone else want to look at the issue with them? There's
What is the issue?
to look at whether that area should be rezoned, and if so, how it should be rezoned. Part of it.
May I as an alternate participate?
Excuse me?
May I as an alternate participate in that?
I could not understand a word of that.
Can I do it too?
As an alternate.
Me too?
Yeah.
Can an alternate
I'm
participate?
an alternate?
Why not?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, yes.
Okay. All right. So that's 3 members. Okay.
That's good, then we keep it under a quorum.
And if I attend, I will attend as a member of the public.
As a member of the
and be
public.
very cautious
Yes.
about my comments.
Yes, because John and I will be in the same room.
Okay, so that's great. All right, Julie and John and Mike and Tavis.
Thank you, Julie.
Well, this is kind of an interesting part of town, and it's kind of
Yep.
been overlooked. So it should be a fun project.
I think it's been preserved for a long time down there, and there's, you know, when you look at deficiencies in the town with the housing and the way things are developing in the town, we need to create the opportunity for our town.
Okay, great. All right, Peter. Discussion about lumbering and viewscapes. Now, this issue, before everybody gets excited, this issue came up because it is in the master plan as a recommendation that we look at these issues. So Peter is going to give us his report on what he has discovered.
And I hope that you can understand what I'm saying.
Yes, you're coming through loud and clear
Yes.
right now.
I adjusted some of my settings. Anyway, the last year when I initially brought this up, there was resistance to having people having to sign something about their timberland work. It turns out that in order to get a intent to cut permit, from the state, basically everybody has to sign that. They're saying that they're going to be using best practices and all that kind of stuff. And so therefore it turns out that the issue which I brought up was basically because I was ignorant of the RSA, which was duplicating what the Natural Resources Committee suggested we should do. So that particular issue is non-existent because it is taken care of by the state. In the area of viewscapes, I think that the real issue is that we should be dealing with education, and therefore if there is something added to people's permits when they're going to build a building, they may end up just making a decision. They're not going to have, I would suggest not having them sign anything to say that they read it, which is true with the intent to permit or intent to cut issue. But there is evidence that darker exteriors in New Hampshire are beneficial for your heating needs. People also should be aware that perhaps your house should blend in with its neighbors rather than having neon pink next door. And so those are the issues which I would be interested in having put out there and just as a piece of paper which goes along with a permit.
Okay, so that's basically something you're suggesting that we enact?
That is. I think that there is just some information which people may be interested in. And I think that Vaughn, when I brought this up before, was saying that, natural tones, darker tones would be useful in blending houses in. And if you're out on a lake looking around, there are some places where there are totally white houses. They jump out at you, and the ones which are darker colors just don't. If you look around our hillsides, there are houses which are dark toned and they don't jump out, and the white houses do. And it is not saying that people have to do something, but they might be concerned. They might want to do something which is going to protect the viewscape of others.
There was also a document that I shared, and now I can't remember which town. It might have been over near Bristol, actually. It might have been a Newfound Lake document, and it's all about the good neighbor. And it's a sheet that talks about not cutting all the trees on a ridge, the color of the house. It gives good reason. It's very simple, and I will try and find it again. That may be a good flyer or something, a good neighbor flyer that can go along with the permit.
I believe that Newfound study ended up also looking at who would be able to see who from where.
Wow.
And Newfound Lake is a relatively narrow valley, and they ended up having various points of view where they looked specifically at particular ridges. They were able to identify who could see who from where. It is not practical in Wolfeboro, and so that is not something that we would investigate. At the same time, the information which the Newfound Lake people gave is useful information for people.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
I'd also like to add that, in quotes, if I can see you, you can see me. Near my house, there's been cutting across the hill. Now I can see everything that they're doing at night because their lights are on, which means they can see me. And I don't think people really think about that till later, like, oh, what a beautiful view. But everybody that's out there is looking at you too. So it might be a nice thing to have that also, Peter, on the flyer type thing, just as a reminder, because you don't think of that. You just think about what you can see. not that people are looking at your stuff.
Go ahead, Mike.
Peter, can you describe what the role of the planning board is in this process?
I think the role of the planning board would be to just say that this should be something which could be included as information in the normal paperwork which goes with getting a building permit.
Vaughn, I know you did give us that information. Do you still have it, that you could send it from Newfound?
I will find it, and I can also edit out the specifics of Newfound Lake and just make it very generic, probably.
Oh, okay. I think it would be helpful if we could see it again. I vaguely remember it, but go ahead, Mike.
Madam Chairman, I'll have to bring up the same objections that I brought up earlier on this issue. I don't really see a role for the planning board in this process. If anything, perhaps it comes from the Board of Selectmen, but I don't think it comes from the planning board. I don't think that we have the authority to include a document with a building permit application, number one. Number two, I'd be concerned about the wording of the document because it uses words like viewscape and color and cutting down trees and neighbors seeing you from the lake side, and none of those are in the planning board's purview. They would be appropriate for an historic district, which we don't have. Perhaps the Heritage Commission could offer a flyer of this sort as a bonus to anybody who gets a building permit or applies for a building permit. But I really don't see a role for the planning board in this. I feel that the wording of the document could be fraught with danger. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, but it is, the issue has come up in the master plan. How about if we just take a look at the document and then...
If there's a document, we should look at it,
Yeah,
because
yes.
then we'll have something concrete to be working on. But
Right.
I mean, I looked into our zoning ordinances for any definition of a viewscape or a view shed. We have a definition of a view shed. It's in 175. And among view sheds, one finds, for example, Cotton Mountain. Cotton Mountain is described as being a view shed in our ordinances. And the question is it in the entire Cotton Mountain? All sides, top and bottom? Does that mean that Beach Pond Road is in the view shed? According to the definition, it would be. And then I looked into the state statutes, and I find only one place where the state actually describes what a viewscape is with regard to planning board activities, and it's in minimum shoreline protection standards, where they describe a viewscape as an area where one can do maintenance within 50 feet of the reference line. But nowhere else is a viewscape defined either in the state statutes or in our own zoning ordinances. How are we going to define what a viewscape is as a planning board? We don't have that authority, I don't think.
Yeah, we have discussed it in the past, and the planning board hasn't wanted to get involved, so, but go ahead, Vaughn.
In a lot of cases, this is just good conscience, good common sense. And there's a lot in architecture that you can't tell people how to do. There's a lot in site planning you can't tell people to do. But I think sending it out as a suggestion is part of planning. And I think the vocabulary of doing the right thing is somewhat lost. We don't know what a good looking street or house looks like anymore. You know, I guess we sort of do. But I think giving guidance is not a bad thing. I don't think we have to have hard and fast rules. You know, I know we're a rule-making committee, but I think we could also be a suggestion committee. Not a committee, sorry, board.
I have the idea that it is possible to educate people without telling them. And I think that that is the purpose of this particular thing, which we might add to add to their issues when they're getting a permit. And it has no restrictions on what you have to do. It just is an educational thing, and education to me is something which allows people to say, oh, I made this decision for this reason, I'm comfortable with it, or, oh, I changed my idea because I thought that was a good idea. And there is nothing here, Mike, that is requiring anybody to do anything. It is just an informational thing which, to me, ends up making sense and may change some people's minds. It may not, but then again, the amount of paperwork is not large.
I have a visceral objection to educating the public by the planning board. It is not, in my opinion, part of our purview. We're here to plan for the town. Education is included in that, of course. But I think that an overt brochure or flyer to accompany a building permit, which has well-intentioned suggestions about colors, construction, treescapes, viewscapes, is a step beyond the bounds of what the planning board has authority to do. And it's very much a visceral feeling.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
for
Yeah,
years, we did have guidelines that it was a package of guidelines given to anybody pulling a building permit. And we turned them into standards now that are very short. But for years and years, the planning board handed out guidelines.
Go ahead. Thank you. Go ahead, Tavis.
I guess personally, I have an acceptance of both. I think Mike is 100% right with the visceral response if it is from the planning board. However, if a community vision type piece of suggestions were put together as an extension of the master plan, perhaps put forth from the planning department rather than the planning board.
Fine. Withdraw all objections.
Or another committee. But I mean, it's mentioned in the master plan. It seems like we need to
Correct.
at least consider it a little more.
Now, where I'm mulling this over more and more in my head is to go out with all building permit applications. If not directly, indirectly suggest that might be a direction the town is going with its regulations, so I'm a bit hesitant there.
Yeah.
I think if it were on a poster in the department, or it was on a bulletin board and there was a flyer that said, you know, how neighborly are you being today? Have you considered, you know, the trees you're cutting, or the color you're painting your garage, or the color of your new shutters, or what have you? You know, that's why it's an extension of the master plan. It's out there, it's free for the taking. It's not part of a permitting process. It's not part of a planning board endeavor. Now, insofar as it's not coming from the planning board, I don't think it would hurt for the planning board to review the document and say, yes, we believe this is consistent with the master plan.
As long as we don't endorse it.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think
That's
there
a great
used to
idea.
be a box that you checked off on a building permit that said, I have reviewed the architectural guidelines and here are the reasons why I didn't follow them. I think we even asked them to state why they didn't.
So we would then withhold a building permit because somebody didn't check a box as
No,
to...
we never did that, but we wanted to make sure that they had that information and they then checked the box. So it did kind of go out with building permit, or they were supposed to have reviewed it.
Yep, that's right. Go ahead, John.
I have to agree with everybody here. I think Mike is right, but I think Tavis makes a good point. What I think about is I like the Heritage Commission name on something and it being available in the planning office to say maybe how can you protect a view shed with information that gives somebody the ability how they can do something without requiring it. And I don't think that the planning board should have something there that that they have to stand behind and enforce, because I think we have enough of that already.
As the person who has put this idea forward, I would be very in favor of what Tavis has suggested as how to proceed, as in it is the planning office that is producing the information. The planning board might look at it to see if it looks like it's an appropriate thing based on what the master plan has suggested. And so I would suggest we go that route.
Okay, does anybody have any objections to moving ahead? Okay, Vaughn, if you would, if you could get us that again, that would be very helpful. Okay?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great.
And Peter is going to develop the handout?
Sure.
Okay,
Beautiful.
yeah, all right.
Only if people help edit it.
Happy to.
Okay, thank you. All right, to be revisited. Okay, Mike, affordable housing update?
Yes, this is an outgrowth of the exercise that Tavis did with our Article 23 multifamily dwellings. I looked at the zoning ordinances that specifically address housing issues in town. We have 3 of them. We have elderly and affordable nonprofit workforce housing. We have inclusionary zoning, and we have multifamily dwellings. The first was dated 2006, the second 09, the third 11. Clearly, they're all old, and they need updating. They need revision. Tavis pointed out that in Article 23, multifamily dwellings, there are a number of inconsistencies. And there are a number of repetitions discussing things that are either prohibited or allowed in other zones. Clearly, as I said earlier tonight, these 3 zoning articles are examples of those that have kind of grown up organically over time and weren't really well conceived with regard to how they either impacted or contradicted other parts of zoning. There are, in addition to that, we have 3 articles. They need revision, they need updating. There is an important bill in the House currently, which I discussed last week, and I'll mention briefly later, which will have a really significant impact on municipal zoning for inclusionary and affordable elderly and workforce housing if they pass. What I'd like to recommend is that, and this will be new to both of them, the chair and Tavis and I sit down and begin revising all 3 of those articles with regard to what's going on in Concord right now regarding HB 586, and come up at the end of the process with what I would like to see, a single article covering affordable and inclusionary workforce elderly housing. So we have 1 article, not 3. It's updated, it takes into account the most recent legislative changes in Concord, and it makes sense, it's not repetitive, and it doesn't contradict itself elsewhere. But this would be a long-term project, probably would not, if we're lucky, maybe it'll go to the voters next March, maybe not, but because the project is large, and because we have a lot on our work program already, I personally don't feel any urgency to get this done right away, but it is something I'd like to get done for sure by the end of next year to put onto the ballot in 23, if not 22. That's where we are on affordable housing.
One of the things I'd like to add to that is, could be the same group working on it. One of the things that's been pointed out to me when I first conceived of bringing this up, one developer, but now three, there are a number of people looking at the density restrictions in areas of town that have adequate water and sewer. So if you look, whether you're looking at Article 23 that allows you to go up to 6 units per acre, or if you look in the commercial zones where you get 6 units per acre. 6 units per acre might make sense if you're looking at individual well and septic, but if you have municipal water and sewer right out front, and you look at the cost of the properties, people are able to potentially satisfy workforce, elderly, multifamily at I'll say a greater density. I don't want to wager a guess as to what that density is, but it's at least double what the ordinance would currently allow. So one of the things that I would see being part of this discussion is we know that we need to work on workforce housing. We know we need to look at multifamily to encourage that, and we also need to address affordable elderly housing. Spreading that out over what's left of the undeveloped land is not really furthering the purpose, and it's not really beneficial to the greater community necessarily. So if you can put affordable, units become affordable when you look at the scale of a project. So if you can put 12 units on half an acre, then it becomes something that allows a builder to even do it at an affordable scale, as opposed to spreading it out over a much larger project. So that's...
Yeah, I think what Tavis is showing is that our current ordinances are not flexible enough to accommodate current needs.
Correct, but
And
at
they
the same
simply
time,
need
I
to be
don't
revised.
I don't think the door should be opened without knowing exactly where that density is going to go and how.
Yeah.
So it's all a process.
Yeah. And there are some parts of HB 586 which will require us to do certain things if that bill passes, and those certain things will have an impact on how we design our housing ordinances. So we kind of have to wait and watch what's going on in Concord before we can really dig deeply into the current problem we have with housing.
Right, we have an inclusionary zoning ordinance that has never been used, and I think it's never been used because people look at it and think they really don't understand it. So that's the type of thing I think we need to look at to make sure these things are doable.
So if you went and made those changes to a greater density, somebody came to the planning office, applied for that application to build, then later on that unit was sold, how would we guarantee that that unit wouldn't become something of a short-term rental, or how would we follow up and keep an eye on things?
The zoning ordinance now requires that anything that's built as affordable as it's defined in the zoning ordinance, then that's forever. So it would have to be sold as an affordable unit. And there's a process that's described that developers would be aware of. So, okay, everybody okay with that direction? Okay, Mike, do you want to do a...
Yeah, really briefly, since I spoke to you all last week, essentially nothing much has changed in Concord on HB 586. That is due out tomorrow, day after tomorrow, out of the Municipal and County Government Committee to the full floor of the House for debate. It is scheduled for activity in March. Nothing further has been done on it. It passed out of committee unchanged. Both Kathy and I advised John McDonald that there were parts of that bill which we felt were mischievous and needed to be fixed. Apparently, none of them were. So we are dealing with the bill as unchanged, but stay tuned. The bill on tiny homes is due out of that same committee on March 11, as is the bill on accessory dwelling units, which requires towns to allow up to 3 ADUs on a single lot, as opposed to the one currently. That's due out of the same committee on March 11 as well. The bill on half-acre lot zoning, which prohibits local ordinances requiring lot sizes of more than half an acre for a single-family home. That's due out of committee on March 11. And the only current Senate bill which is important to us is kind of a Senate version of HB 586. That had a public hearing on the 8th of this month, and according to its docket and status, no further activity is planned for that bill, and I don't know how to interpret that. It's either that they're just not doing anything right now, or it might just be that's a nice way of saying inexpedient to legislate. So I'll stay tuned on that, and that's all there are on those, on the House bills and the Senate bills.
Okay, short-term rental committee is going to be meeting on Monday, and the lighting committee is meeting on Monday. I forwarded an email that Peter Cook sent, asked me to forward to you, and Peter Cook said that he was going to attend the lighting committee meeting, so I believe that his issues will be discussed, or some of them in that forum.
We'll make some time for him in the public comment. He can address his issues.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Kathy, I have Ann. I don't know who Ann is, but she, Susan guessed maybe Ann Blodgett, but all I have on here is Ann with no image and muted. But a chat message came into me that says, I've sent comments in chat to planning board, but I guess those go nowhere. So if we talk about the weather for a little bit, maybe Ann will respond and let me know if she wants to speak or send comments that I can get to the board. I haven't heard back yet.
Okay, Ann Blodgett,
Well, it could be Ann, anybody. I literally just have Ann. We're guessing it might be Ann Blodgett, but I haven't heard yet.
Okay. Ann, are you listening in? Because we do have an opportunity for public comment. If you are...
I have been listening in. It sounds like you got a lot of different directions. I guess since I have not been involved in the drive-through restaurant thing, my primary comments at the beginning were, why are we revisiting this after it's been voted down so many times by the townspeople?
Why are we looking at it? We were... Paul Zimmerman asked us to revisit the issue again, and so the planning board felt that we wanted to really find out how the community felt about the issues. So did you hear?
I guess the community, I guess being a member of the community and hearing other people, there's confusion as to why we can continuously vote on it, and one person can take up so much time for the planning board to have to delve into something that's already been voted on.
Okay, well, I mean, you're right, that it has been voted on a couple times, 2 or 3 times, and we felt that we wanted to make sure that we got all the input so that we could put the issue to rest. That's what we're attempting to do.
Madam Chair.
I feel that it sets a really bad precedent because people who just don't go away can continue to take up your time, valuable time.
Okay, hang on, Mike wanted to say something, and
Is this Ann Blodgett?
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
Hi, Ann, sorry. This is the thought. There have been two separate votes, basically on the same article, presented by the same individual, 2 years running. In both cases, the vote was 2-1 against reopening the issue.
Right.
But that one counts. 1/3 of the town voted yes on the issue. The planning board decided that rather than just totally disenfranchise that 1/3, let's ask the entire town through a public forum what they think. Once we've heard from the town in the form of not a vote, but in the form of public opinion, we will really have heard final answer on the issue, and then we can go and simply put into practice what the town has told us they want to do. But
Doesn't this set, sorry, Mike, I'm sorry. Doesn't this set a bad precedent that anybody who continues to push a point, even though the townspeople have voted for it, against it twice, that they can keep bringing things up on anything?
Well, yeah, squeaky wheels get the most oil. I mean, that's just the way the game works. That's called democracy.
I dare say that other things get neglected, such as short-term rentals, which are greatly usurping the housing population. So for you guys to be thinking about expanding density for housing when the short-term rentals are using up the available housing in town seems like a very short-term thought process.
Well, I don't want to speak for the board. I'll speak only for myself. We have a committee looking into short-term rentals and their economic impact on the town. We're also thinking about we're having a revisit of our housing ordinances because they're so out of date that they simply don't correspond to current conditions. We're doing that in tandem. We're not neglecting one for the other, and we're not neglecting both for drive-through restaurants. We have a fairly heavy work program this year, and those are three issues that we're tackling in tandem.
okay.
I understand.
Yeah,
Is the public allowed to attend short-term rental committee meetings?
Just a second, Ann, can I just add that the housing issues that we're looking at, that's affordable housing. So it really doesn't, this would be housing that would have a deed restriction.
Right, I understand that, but Mike talked about 3 categories of housing. And so if short-term rentals are being looked at separately, if those short-term rentals are quantified, and if there is some form of regulation, those units could potentially come back to be housing. So in other words,
Well, that is one of the reasons that we formed the short-term rental committee, because of the fact that a lot of housing is being used in that manner, and we are trying to figure out how to come to how to address that issue. So,
and I would urge all of you to look at the existing regulations on the books to look at the fact that we aren't regulating what's there as respects short-term housing, short-term rentals, sorry. I think there are regulations on the books and we're just not regulating or enforcing.
okay, Ann, I just am looking at your comments about the charrette. You agree that it should be in person. Thank you for that. And the involvement of the Heritage Commission, I talked to Tavis about that and told him that it was Maggie Steers really on that committee as the head of the Heritage Committee. So any decision is going to need to be made along with her input, and I guess the Heritage Committee.
Yeah, Maggie did a lot of the origination work originally with Matt, and so I have emailed her during this meeting to let her know that you guys are making decisions.
Yeah.
And that
Okay, well, we haven't made a decision yet. We're still talking about the issue. And then you wanted to know about the definition for habitable space.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, Tavis, can you deal with that issue, please?
What is the question?
She wanted
Define
to know
habitable
the
space.
definition of habitable space.
Those of us sitting out here that don't attend every meeting are, always playing catch up.
Okay.
If you have a copy of our zoning, or if you'd like to look at it online, just look in 175 under habitable space, and you'll find it there.
Oh, are you?
You can go to the town's website also.
I can-
It shows up on the town's website as the E360.
I mean, that's literally what I'm doing right now, if you'd like me to find it and read it.
So can I
I
comment?
guess my only question was, you guys talked about it like those of us who are listening in know what it is, so
Yeah, I know, sorry about that.
that's okay. I mean,
So can I comment on the drive-thru restaurants?
Yes,
With Ann?
yes.
So Ann, the last two times it was approached to the town, it was presented as a warrant article, and the presenter felt that the town wasn't being fair to the 1/3 because we were making a recommendation on that petition article. And I can think of many other things in the town, such as the town hall, the over 50 beds for hotel units. There are things that we've hashed out more than once, and not that I'm saying this is a standalone situation where we shouldn't discuss it. I think as a board, we haven't exhausted our presentation to the people with drive-thru restaurants, and I think that's where I'm looking to get a little information on that side, rather than a petition warrant article.
Well, and to that end, there's, as much as the argument could be made, it's been voted on once, twice, or 3 times. There's nothing preventing a resident from submitting a petition warrant article every year. And
Right, I do see
actually
it
commend
seems-
the board for saying, look, it has come to us as a petition twice without us having the ability to put the work behind it to make an evaluation of the decision. So this time, short of a new petition coming in, let's grab it by the horns, do the research, find out what we want, and then see if the planning board's going to make a recommendation or not. As far as habitable space definition, quote, a space in a building suitable for living, sleeping, eating, or cooking. Closets, hallways, storage, toilet rooms on the first floor only, or utility spaces in similar areas are not considered habitable spaces.
Okay. I'm remembering this from another meeting a long time ago, but it's sort of illogical, so I just thank you for that. I guess my only comment about the drive-through is that if 2/3 of the voters vote, twice against drive-throughs or 3 times against drive-throughs, I think, since I've lived here, it just seems that you're opening a Pandora's box of possible precedents to have to go down this road with every single time something's defeated, and there's, you're never going to make progress. So I feel sorry for you.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ann. And now I'm seeing your comments. I didn't even know that we had that, so thanks for helping educate me.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, all right. Okay, anyone else out there that, okay.
I don't see anyone else in the ether.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, folks, anything else anyone wants to bring up? Tavis, what do we have coming the first meeting in March?
There is a subdivision that will be coming. My goal is to have the staff review and materials out to the board by the end of this week, so you'll be prepared. It has been to TRC, and those comments will be included with the packet that goes out.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, then we can adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, roll call. Peter? Vaughn?
Yes.
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And Kathy, I vote in favor of adjourning. Hey,